How are we doing there, boys and girls? Manthieus here, welcome back to another video. So after my last video where I spoke about some of my early investments for the 11.1 patch in World of Warcraft, a community member by the name of Wooraah, some of you will know him if you lurk on the stream, has put together a little document for us to see just what a Mega Goblin is doing at this time of the expansion. Now, of course, this is the preliminary sort of investment side of things. We're all going to have to wait for the results to come in a few weeks' time to see whether this was a success or a failure, fortune or folly, as Woo has labelled it here. But this goes to show what somebody with an awful amount of gold may potentially look at doing, and this can showcase to you in a little bit of detail how you can scale things up once you get a little bit more gold in game, and really adding to the definition of that you need to have gold to make gold. So Woo has gone in and spent about 40 million gold, or a little under 40 million gold, on pre-purchasing a bunch of materials. He's split it into different, presumably guild banks or even accounts potentially, to be able to keep track of what's what. Now, this is actually a PDF file, which is currently linked on my Discord. But of course, if you don't want the trouble of coming through to the Discord and finding it that way, I'll see if I can find, or I will ask Woo if he can put it in like a Dropbox or something as an alternative. But if you want to have a read through this yourself, I can't unfortunately link it directly below because it's not an online public document. But you can jump into the Discord, and it is located in its own little thread under the gold making section in the Discord. So this is really quite detailed, and not so much about what he's purchasing, but more about some of the mindset that a player like this goes through when it comes into actually trying to take a bunch of the gold they have, look at what historical trends have been, and how can they then utilize those historical trends to, you know, make their gold making adventure a little bit easier in the future. Why investing so much? I'm not going to go through every single slide in huge detail. I'll let you flick through at your own pace, but mainly because he's recently reached a personal goal of his, which was 1 billion gold. It's absolutely ridiculous milestone. There's probably not that many players out there with that much liquid gold. I can name a few, but of course I'm in a position where those players kind of talk to me quite frequently. I'm nowhere near there yet, and probably, to be perfectly honest, never will be, because as much as I enjoy gold making, I'm also very lazy. But when you've got a bunch of gold, you can do these little experiments, and this sort of, like I said, reiterates that you kind of need some gold to be able to make a bunch of gold. But anyway, gathering some data on what works and what doesn't when it comes to pre-patch speculation investments. Have been relatively successful already with similar investments in the past. You don't make 1 billion gold without roughly knowing what you're doing already. And basically it was a fun little project for them to see if they can beat the market. The philosophy around this, though, was just trying to sort of play into what is slowly becoming the investment meta, I guess you could call. Beating the rush is a big part of this. You want to be able to be paying attention to what's going on before it's public information. So speculation waves usually start to hit at the beginning of the PTR. We've just had the 11.1 PTR drop. You want to be thinking about this before everybody else is thinking about this. This is kind of the point, right? You want to be looking at the information and maybe making a few plays before most people are even considering it. And doing this before a PTR is kind of the way you have to go now. We often see a PTR lands and then there's a big spike in demand for materials because everybody then goes, what should I buy for the new patch? Forgetting the fact that some people have already been doing this and are already flipping to you in the first place, which is quite a fun little trick that happens a few times. This is not financial advice. This should be, firmly pointed out. This is, of course, playing a video game, and this is why you should always sort of mainly only play with gold that you're willing to lose, and this is a video game at the end of the day. If you have ever purchased gold with like your credit card, for example, I would probably steer clear of doing any of this. You can play with Monopoly money all you like, but remember that not everything of this does actually translate into the real world, so don't take this as financial advice. It is for entertainment purposes, as has been listed here. But the patch cycle then, what happens and when does it happen? This is what I mentioned about yesterday. Woo's put a nice little graph together here showing what kind of happens. My big head's kind of a little bit in the way here, but at the very beginning of the expansion, everything is super duper mega expensive. And after the first couple of days, we see prices go from 500 gold a herb down to like 100 gold a herb, some level of normality after a few days. Then the raid kicks in, when things take their first spike, and then slowly but surely we're in this sort of phase now where things have slowly been getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper every single week. And now this is where we're in sort of a relatively optimal investment phase, really. Just before the PTR comes out is where you want to be looking at buying stuff. That's in theory, at least, when most stuff is at its cheapest. And then the PTR and all the speculation comes in, and then a bunch of dumping when the raid actually launches, and then we repeat the cycle once again of things getting cheaper and cheaper over time. Examples of prior performance. Not everything that these people are doing when they're looking at doing big investments like this is pure guesswork. There is a lot of data out there that you can look at that can really help you and can sort of showcase, well, this happened in the past. And so because it happened in the past, there is at least a good chance that it might repeat itself again. And so we've done a little bit of analysis from back in Dragonflight. A similar expansion with a similar crafting system in place, I guess you'd say, where the economy was mostly the same. And you can see here there's some popular items. Jewel crafting raw mats and jewel crafting gems is what's hidden behind my camera here. But you can see these are slowly but surely sort of rising and peaking and then quickly falling off. There are some trends that you can look at that can be helpful when trying to make some of those decisions. And then some actual historic examples here. Things like Wraithbark rank 3 took a massive increase in value when the raid launched. Chromatic Dust did a similar. The Banquets, of course, take a huge bump in value when everybody all of a sudden goes from not wanting feasts at all to every man and their dog wanting feasts. No surprises, we see a big jump in value there. And Draconic Augment Runes from back in Dragonflight as well. These sort of patterns often repeat themselves, and if you know roughly when the cheap area was and when the expensive area was historically, sometimes you can look to repeat that with the investments that you make in current patches. The investment strategy then is it is important to have a little bit of a strategy when you go into doing something like this, especially if you're spending a bunch. Alts, Woo created 4 fresh Volpira alts and gave them each 10 million gold to invest, as well as a bunch of bag space for keeping it all. To keep the data clean, he actually used separate WoW accounts. You, of course, don't necessarily need to do this if you try and do any replication of this. This is just to make sure that his TSM data is clean and can make it easier to track the results. TSM usually, well, you can set TSM to track data across multiple accounts, but you have to tell it to do it. So by default, it doesn't. It only tracks all of your characters in one account. So 10 million on each, 10 million on 4 different accounts invested in different ways. We'll be able to see just how that plays out. Invest over an extended period. Try not to do, I'm often guilty of this. I tend to do most of my investing in like one snapshot go, but I'm not investing at anywhere near the same level of scale. Investing over an extended period allows you to just take small chunks off the market when they're at their absolute cheapest. This means you're not buying up a bunch of the expensive stuff and creating a reset at any point. You're just literally squirreling away the really, really, really cheap stuff. This means you're never overpaying for a single one of your materials, and you're not accidentally resetting markets and sort of hindering your own performance by doing so either. And then the focus then is on high turnover, high demand items, focusing on stuff that just sells fast and sells in quantity. And so in theory, probably no surprise to most people, focusing very heavily on the current expansion materials. How did Woo split up the investments then? Well, there was 3 different categories he used here: confident, normal, and once again behind my camera is the word cautious here. Things that you should probably be very careful investing in. These are mostly anything that's considered a crafted item, because crafted items under normal circumstances can just be remade if there's ever a shortage of them. There is rarely a shortage of the materials and of the crafted items. If there's ever a shortage of the crafted items, very quickly you'll find a bunch of people jump onto crafting a bunch of them, and then all of a sudden there's not a shortage anymore. So flipping crafted items is very risky. Slightly less risky, sort of normal tier things. You're looking at ores, ciphers, shadow inks, dawnweave, gloom chitin, sort of basically stuff that sells reasonably well, but there's always a constant supply of it coming into the market, so you've got to be careful. And then stuff he's relatively confident in was things like herbs, enchanting materials, raw foods, especially stuff that goes into the feasts. Data mined items for new patterns and recipes can always be good ones. And then things like crushed gemstones, which are sort of processed materials. They're materials that only exist after somebody has put some effort into making them. This is why enchanting mats is a big one. No enchanted mats just happen to exist from nowhere. Enchanted mats have to be created by somebody disenchanting something. And in The War Within, considering enchanting now has quality attached to it as well, not only do you have to have an enchanter to disenchant something, you have to have an enchanter that has chosen to spec well into, I think there's 30, 60, 90, I think there's up to 120 points, if I remember, in the enchanting tree, purely for disenchanting and getting better at disenchanting. So any random enchanter that's not played with professions is never going to produce any more than like quality 1, the occasional quality 2 materials. But those quality 2 and quality 3 enchanted mats have to have come from somewhere. Somebody has to put some effort into making them. And so you can be quite confident that when everybody stops putting effort into disenchanting because they're out playing the rest of the game, there's a good chance then that those are materials that sort of, might see a spike in value. Woo was also being quite cautious about the amount of stock that he was holding of these as well. He doesn't want to hold too much stock. He wants to be able to know that with the amount that he buys, he won't have too much problem selling it again, and this is a good theory to have. And this is true for any sort of material you purchase. And he's gone as far as to put some example of shopping strings in here. I actually went through this whole document on stream a couple of days ago. Woo watched me do it, and he's actually added another page, I believe, here for those who often look at something like this and it just like goes straight over their head. These shopping strings, for example, TSM code is, I can read it like a normal language, but that's because I've used TSM for years. I think Woo very quickly realised most people look at this and it's just gobbledygook. There is something you can do about that though. If you don't understand any TSM strings that like content creators share, you can, believe it or not, use things like ChatGPT to tell it like, okay, use TSM syntax. What does this mean? Tell me what this means in plain English. And so you can actually use, believe it or not, AI to sort of decipher these things if needs be as well. Plus, there's plenty of additional resources on TSM's website to help sort of dissect and understand the strings if needed. So what did Woo actually end up investing in then? You can see from this little list, 40 million gold goes a long way when you're investing into a wide variety of things. He didn't seem to be too strict with what he invested in. Obviously only putting huge quantities of gold into a couple of specific items. I know this might be a little bit spoilerific, but crystallized augment runes was his biggest investment out of anything. Out of the 40 million, nearly 6 million of it went into augment runes. He is, though, we'll talk about these columns in a minute, he is holding significantly more quantity of augment runes than he would probably like. But augment runes tend to always be a relatively safe bet. As soon as the raid kicks in, the price of those things always rockets, at least for a small period of time. And Kaheti Slum Shark, any of you that's done any fishing or cooking, either or, will have noticed over the first patch of The War Within that this slum shark is big business, honestly. It's a pain in the ass to farm and it's needed in the feast. Two things that are going to make it, of high value, in high demand at least. But realistically, you can kind of look at this list and you can see pretty much a little bit of everything. And that's a good tactic to have. I spoke in my last video about early investments of that you don't want to put all of your gold into one thing, because if that one thing fails, you have just then failed. If you invest a little bit into 20, 30, 40, 50 different items, some of them will go up, and the ones that go up will counteract some of them that go down, and then any that don't move anywhere, you can sell back out again quite comfortably without worrying about it. It's a far safer strategy to spread yourself thin, often referred to as like the spaghetti on the wall approach. But of course, you want to make sure that, you know, at least whatever you are investing in is done with some sort of logic before so anyway. There's a couple of extra columns here that I said I'd mention about. Woo's put some details on these. There's the percent hold. This is an extra bonus column that he's made in TSM. You can actually do this in TSM yourself if you wish. It can be quite useful. There's another one, the trend column. Consider the trend like a percentage more than a gold value. So 100 would mean that it's stayed exactly the same price. Above 100 means the price is rising slightly over the last couple of weeks, and a number below 100, and the more extreme the number below, the more extreme the decline in price, for example. So this trend can be done here. You can see down here, trend indicator of whether the price is rising or falling. For example, 100 gold is neutral, 90 gold means the price has fallen 10% in the last 2 weeks based on TSM data. So you can do some clever things in TSM to give you some more useful ways of analyzing what a market price might be doing. The sales plan, of course, it's all good and well buying up a bunch of this stuff, but of course you've got to go out there and sell it as well. He's not waiting until the patch hits to start selling. This is a big mistake I see a lot of people make, that they buy stuff before the patch, and their assumption, and this is where it's sort of, you know, slightly misguided, it's an assumption that soon as the patch hits, the price goes up. It's not necessarily true. In fact, in many cases, if you buy early enough, you get the opportunity to sell to the people who are buying it to squirrel it away for the patch. You get the opportunity to sell it to them at a premium, and then when they go to sell it for a profit and realize that they and everybody else is doing the same thing and the price tanks and they panic and then they sell it quickly, you can often actually buy it up again. You can double dip if you're really clever about this. But don't wait until the patch starts to actually start selling some of this stuff. If you get a reasonable return, sell it. Selling to the speculators is often a very lucrative way of doing this whole thing. Posting little and often. This is key, not to flood the market. The last thing you want to do is take 5 million gold of material that you've purchased and put it all back on the auction house in one go. You'll remember from a few slides back, Woo's way, he never wanted to hold too much stock, and this is so that he can sell it back out based upon how much sells on an average day anyway. So he can kind of drip feed materials back into the market. This can all be pretty easily set up within TSM. 0.5% of the daily sold is what he's going to be posting, but he's going to be keeping, you know, small chunks of that on the auction house in 12-hour increments. Taking the accepting that not everything is going to be a winner. Like I mentioned a minute ago, some things this will work on. Some things the price will rise on and you'll be able to sell them for a profit. Some things, though, won't. Some things, you know, you can't win every time. Some things will drop in price. But what you'll hope for is that you'll win more often than you'll lose because of, you know, past experience and, you know, historical data that sort of showcases that this is a good strategy. If your strategy is good, you hope to come out winning more often than you lose. And this is why spreading across multiple things is important as well. Of course, we will have to wait to find out the actual results to this. I'm hoping that we will do as a part 2 in a couple of weeks' time just to see how it works. I suspect that this will be relatively profitable. We did talk about this in a little bit more detail on stream the other day. My guesstimation is Woo is probably going to look for about 15 to 20% profit on this. That will mean that he can sell the materials relatively quickly. He's not waiting for a massive payday and risking all of his investment, but it means he should take that, what was it, an initial 40 mil, and there's a good chance he'll be able to turn about a 15 million gold profit out of that, I would suspect. But that shows investments and flipping from one patch to another is lucrative, but only lucrative when you do it at a massive scale. If you've only got 100,000 gold, 200,000 gold on your account, you can't physically buy enough to make the profit you would get worthwhile doing. You're far better at that level, and this is why a lot of people would recommend to players that have a small amount of actual gold at the moment, spend time farming. Farming doesn't cost you anything in the first place, other than obviously your time doing it. Flipping is something that you need some gold to make more gold. But anyway, I'll wrap it up for there. I didn't want this video to end up being too long. I have noticed we've just hit the 20-minute mark. So if you're still here 20 minutes into a Manthieus video, thank you very much. I do appreciate it. Once again, I will ask Wooraah if I can put this in like a Dropbox to make it easier to share. Alternatively, jump into the Discord. You can find the PDF linked in the Discord. Thank you once again for Woo to putting this together, helping the community out with some sort of some expertise from a clearly very well-established Goblin. Give the video a like if you enjoyed it, boys and girls. Consider subscribing if you're new around here. I'm going to be live on the YouTubes and on the Twitch live streams, probably testing the PTR over the next couple of days, so come say hi. But yeah, I'll see you all next time. Peace.